Coming up on Backchecking the Bolts.
I think we've got to get out of this mindset of what $10 million means in the current salary cap. It sounds so big, right? $10 million. I got a defenseman who's 30 some years old is going to be paid $10 million. It's less than 10% of your salary cap. If you can get with Karlsson, it was the same thing that we were talking about with Raddysh. Term was always going to be the big deal. If you can get, I don't have absolutely zero problem with John Karlsson, 2 years, $10 million. I think he still has a lot left in his game.
Welcome to Backchecking the Bolts. Backchecking the Bolts is your cup of coffee to get you the latest on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Join host Jason Linkus and the managing editor of Raw Charge, Justin Godfrey, as they break down the Lightning's most recent games and go beyond the highlights, telling you what the box scores didn't. It's time to drop the puck.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Backchecking the Bolts. It's one of those episodes where 2 days ago we thought we were going to talk about the NHL Draft, and then all these trades started happening. We're talking from Darren Raddysh to Bowen Byram. You name it, guys are moving all over the place. Justin and I are going to break that down for you coming up. We're also going to talk a little bit about the NHL Draft. The Lightning have a few draft picks, not a ton coming up. They start with the second round pick. They have a third, 3/5, a 6th, and a 7th. We're going to talk about that. We also posed a question in social media about the Darren Raddysh contract, especially when you started hearing the Bowen Byram news. We're going to get to the mailbag and get some news from viewers. Finally, the NHL is talking expansion. Once again, they look to become the first major league to have 33 franchises, and it's looking like it's going to be either Houston or Austin. Dan Friedkin, who is the billionaire down in the Houston area, he can choose pretty much whatever city he wants. Now, he still has to get approved, but we're going to talk about what city we think would be the best for the NHL to go to. Now I'm going to bring in Justin Godfrey from Raw Charge. You can read him each and every day at www.rawcharge.com. Justin, again, we thought we were going to be talking about the draft, but this is nothing but trades, trade and signings, guys moving for huge price tags. What was your initial thought on Darren Raddysh?
Honestly, what I expected. I think the last time we had talked about it, I was 60-40 that he would go elsewhere. I did think he was going to make it to July 1st and, test the free agent market. But the deal he ends up signing for, 8.5 by 8 years, the only team that could offer him 8 years was the Lightning, and they did it in a sense where they did the sign-in trade. Toronto apparently came in pretty hot as far as wanting him. The Lightning and Darren Raddysh were pretty far apart. They said it was pretty much by Thursday last week that they realized that there just was a gap too big. So that's when they started reaching out as far as teams that had interest in him. Worked out the deal with Toronto. They get a 5th round pick back, which is, you get something for a player that wasn't going to sign with you. It's a big risk for Toronto, honestly. The 8.5 by 8, that 8 years just kind of stares you right in the face. And, we talked about it, and that's kind of what the Lightning were looking at. How long do you sign this guy for? Some of the rumored deals was around the 5 to 6 year mark, which, would have put him at 35, 36 years old. Toronto's now on the hook till he's 38. Is it a breakout season? Is it a one-off? What's he going to do now that he's got the money? There's going to be a lot more pressure on him because he's now the number one guy in Toronto, right? I think it's the 3rd richest deal in Maple Leafs history. So putting him behind guys like Nylander and Austin Matthews. So there's going to be a lot more pressure on him. Can he perform? I think he can. He's a really nice guy. I think he's got a good head on his shoulders, but it's going to be a different world for him now.
One, he's going to be in the spotlight. You're going to Toronto. In the NHL, it doesn't get any brighter spotlight than in Toronto. But I want to say this. If he's going to go one place, I think he ended up in a place where, at least on the power play, he can still be as effective. You could see him playing catch with Austin Matthews, that one-timer that he was able to get from Kucherov. Now it's just going to come from another left-handed passer, whether it be Tavares, whether it be Matthews. There's a lot to like with his landing situation. That being said, now he's not just going to play top line minutes. He's going to be the guy. He's going to be under the microscope. We all talked about the fact that when Victor Hedman left, was injured earlier in the season, that's when Raddysh really got his chance. And I'm going to equate this to baseball. They say the first time a rookie goes through the process, they don't really have a book on you. Now, Raddysh had played a number of years, but this was the first time he saw extended minutes and had extended success. Do you think opposing teams, approach him a little differently when they play him now?
Yeah, I think you got a lot more video on him. You know what he likes to do. So it's going to be one of those things. Can he make that next adjustment? I mean, we've talked about this here with some of the younger players like, Charles Edward Destu. You come up, there's not a lot of tape on you. You can get away with things that maybe you can't a little bit later in the season. Can you make that next adjustment? So he showed that, yes, he can play first line minutes in a limited time role. It was always going to be when Hedman was healthy, his minutes were probably going to back off. Now it's going to be, hey, you're the guy. And this is part of the game. This is part of the deal. The good players are able to accelerate and ramp up and match the intensity that you need when given the chance at the next level. Like you said, I think he's going to a really good spot. I think there were limited places he could go and still succeed, and Toronto's one of them. He's also going back to his hometown as well, so you got that added pressure of the home kid. There was a picture, I think the Lightning actually put it out, a picture of him as a kid in, a Toronto Maple Leafs, like, I don't know if it was a uniform or like a onesie or something like that as a kid, kind of like the Tavares bedsheets thing. So, all these kids that grew up in Ontario have these Toronto memories. So good for him. I'm glad, I'm really happy for him. He is a guy that put the time in and he deserves to get paid. So I'm glad he's going there. I hope he succeeds, except for the 4 times that they play the Lightning and maybe like the first round of the playoffs or something like that. But it's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be see how he adjusts his game. And, can he continue under the pressure of, that first time he whiffs a few shots or he fires you like 5 shots over the net and the Leafs lose 3-1 to Ottawa or something like that. The critics are going to come out and they're going to be like, why did we sign this guy for this much money? How does he bounce back from that? And that's going to be a fun story to watch, now that we have no skin in the game.
The one thing I think with this deal, he's going to be 38 at the end of this deal. NHL defensemen typically don't age well after about the age of 34, 35. There's very few that have really succeeded and done well. You're going to see a drop off. That's the one thing that I would wonder with Raddysh. But Justin, there was another defenseman on the move and the Chicago Blackhawks paid dearly. It was Bowen Byram from the Buffalo Sabres. The young 25-year-old was dealt to Chicago along with Jordan Greenway. Greenway's making $4 million himself. They got that bad contract off the books. The Blackhawks gave up the 4th overall, a 26th second, and Louis Crevier. What did you think of this deal?
You look at it on the initial, and I know the social media kind of aspect was it that Jarmo kind of fleeced Chicago here. It's a big price to pay for a guy who's never been the number 1 defenseman. Byram has played well so far in his career. What's he like 25? He's always been this guy who seems to be his potential seems to outweigh his actual production. In Buffalo, he had a really good offensive year. But again, he wasn't the number 1 guy. He wasn't the number 1 guy in Colorado. He plays behind Cal McCarr. He plays behind Devin Taves. He goes to Buffalo in that deal for Casey Middlestat. Has a good season, but he's playing behind Rasmus Dahlin, or he's playing, I guess he kind of played with Rasmus Dahlin. He played with Owen Power a little bit. He kind of bounced between the top 2 pairings. But again, he's not the guy that was the number 1 defenseman in that organization. Put up some good offensive numbers. His defensive stats are a little underwhelming. But now he's going to Chicago. He's got 1 year left on his deal. He's going to be playing for a contract, which could be a bonus in some people's eyes, but he's going to be that number 1 guy on a young Chicago team. And there's going to be a lot of pressure on him. He's going to play some tough minutes, over the next year. And can he succeed? Can he make it worth that number 4 overall? I think it's something, I think the last time one of a top 5 picks was traded where both teams knew it was going to be a top 5 was something like 2009. It's been a long time since this has happened that, this high of a draft pick has been moved. And if you're looking at it from Chicago's angle, it's time you got to take that next step. You can't keep relying on these top draft picks. You've got enough talent in your system. It's kind of the same thing with San Jose and the moves that they made. You've got to start getting better. You can't be drafting in the top 5 next year. I think that's kind of the message from ownership is you guys have got to be better. You got to go for a playoff spot. I think Byram kind of does make them better. It doesn't solve their number one need, which is getting a winger for Connor Bedard, or signing Connor Bedard to an extension. I think that's their number one and two things they got to do this summer. But it does make their defense a little bit better. Before we started recording, I kind of compared it. He could be kind of like JJ Moser, a guy who's kind of been a good defenseman, never really given the shot, but once he gets that shot as a number one defenseman, he shines. If that happens for Chicago, then it's worth the number 4 pick. If he kind of struggles with the added minutes, then it's going to look really bad. And this could be one of those career-ending kind of deals for a GM. If this doesn't work out, how much longer is he going to be in Chicago? So,
yeah, I almost think that you're almost playing on tilt making this deal a little bit. And
a little bit,
let's talk a little bit about Bowen Byram. Byram, former number 1 pick, has bounced around a little bit, started with Colorado, as you had mentioned, went to Buffalo, now heading to Chicago. There are rumors out there that he could be asking upwards of $10 million in his next contract. If you're Chicago right now, you have to pay it. You have no other option. You can't let this guy go to free agency. Now, is there talk behind the scenes? I'm sure there's a little bit. But if you're Chicago, you have to sign him. You have no other option. If you're the general manager and you don't, you're done. I don't care what happens. You are getting your walking papers. But Justin, one of the things I did was I asked Jonah Ahrens from the Sabre Report Podcast. We've had him on before. And I asked him about the Bowen Byram deal. Here's what he had to say. He said, Byram is a good player. He can be great at times, but the reality is he's slotted perfectly for the Sabres as their 3rd or 4th guy. He's the ideal complementary player. The Blackhawks trading the 4th overall and the 2nd round pick and a decent right shot defenseman in Louis Crevier is quite the overpayment. And it goes to show how desperate they are to surround Bedard with ready now talent. The Sabres are a worse hockey team today, but this deal is such an unbelievable value in return that they may lose for a guy they may lose in free agency next year that no one's questioning it. They now have 2 first-round picks this year, a second-round pick, future first-round picks, plenty of cap space and young prospects to chase that replacement for Byram. He's basically saying we're going to have to see if Kekalainen can capitalize properly on this move. I think if I'm Buffalo, I make this deal. But the other thing I wanted to say is I wanted to open up the mailbag because I asked people, I said, if Byram gets $10 million a year, you saw Raddysh get 8 years at 8.5. Is the Raddysh deal for Toronto a bargain, market value, or did the Leafs overpay? So I'm going to read a couple responses. Bruce Melanson said, Raddysh was a reach for the money in the term, period. Had he done it in back-to-back seasons? Maybe, maybe not. But still, with that being said, we always like Darren's effort and glad to see him with the personal gain. He also had mentioned with the young defensemen like Moser, Lilleberg, and DeStew, we have a pretty solid blue line. We now need to find that power forward. Do you agree with Bruce that we need to find a power forward?
I do think for Tampa, the bigger hole is that kind of second line forward. They're going to be okay with defense. They do lose a little depth. I mean, the nice thing about the way Raddysh played is it takes minutes off of other players. You're going to have to figure out how you replace that. Do you flip Moser back to the right-hand side and have him play with Hedman? Do you move Crozier up? Do you move Cernak up? Do you break up the Cernak-McDonough pairing that's been so good for the years? There are going to be some questions that have to be answered in training camp, not to mention free agency. There's been a lot of smoke about the John Carlson move to Tampa, but I think at this point the bigger concern is you need one more scoring forward. I think that kind of hurt them a little bit in the playoffs. The depth wasn't quite there that they needed. They didn't have that guy that could kind of match up with that Hagel Cirelli line unless you move Kucherov, which then weakens your top line. So I think if they can get a scoring winger, and that's going to be And that is now developing into a precious commodity. I mean, with Alex Tuch, if we circle back to Buffalo, Alex Tuch signs the big deal and then is traded to Washington. I think that's somebody the Lightning were targeting this in free agency. He would have been a good compliment. He's an upgrade on Oliver Bjorkstrand. He's a better Oliver Bjorkstrand, basically. So, if you can fill that hole, it eliminates the Darren Raddysh. I think the Lightning are also expecting big bounce back years from Hedman and Braden Point, which would go a long way to replacing some of that offense that Raddysh had produced last year.
The next comment was from Greg Georges. He says the contract depends on how well he does this year. He said, I'd rather have John Carlson, who is going to be a free agent, played for the Anaheim Ducks last year. I should say finished the season with Anaheim, started with Washington. He'd rather have him for more money, but on a 2-year deal. And I think that's where we're at right now with the Lightning when it comes to a right shot defenseman. It sounds like there's mutual interest between the Lightning and John Carlson. Carlson's making $8 million right now. If you had to pay him 2 years, $20 million, $10 million a year, do you do that deal?
I got no problem with that deal. I think we've got to get out of this mindset of what $10 million means in the current salary cap. It sounds so big, right? $10 million. Oh my God. A defenseman who's 30 some years old is going to be paid $10 million. It's less than 10% of your salary cap. If you can get with Carlson, it was the same thing that we were talking about with Raddysh. Term was always going to be the big deal. If you can get, I don't have absolutely zero problem with John Carlson, 2 years, $10 million. I think he still has a lot left in his game. One of the interesting things is I see a lot of comments about we don't need another older, slower player on defense. John Carlson is not a slow player. He can still skate. If he comes to the Lightning, he's probably your fastest defenseman, other than Max Groshef, if Max Groshef makes the team. So you got to look at what he brings to the team. He's going to have a lot of similar qualities as Raddysh had. Not the big shot, but he's going to be an offensive first defenseman. He's going to be able to skate the puck out of your zone, which really helps in today's NHL, right? If you have somebody who can carry the puck from one zone to the next, that eliminates a lot of these cross ice passes that they get blocked a lot of times. So if they're going to add that to the roster, he can eat up minutes. He's a 20-minute guy. Even as he ages, he's still going to get you 20 to 22 minutes. He's going to be a power play guy. He fills a lot of gaps that the Lightning lose with Raddysh moving on. So yes, it's the shock value of seeing the sticker price of $10 million. But again, with the way the cap has gone up this year, the way it's going to go up next year as well, with the projections, it's not that bad a deal. I mean, it's basically signing somebody for $8 million 2 years ago. And there's also the chance, we always talk about it. People criticize Florida for it. If John Carlson signs in Tampa for 2 years, $8.5 million, that's basically equivalent for him signing $10 million somewhere else, in a heavily taxed state. So I could see him, signing for under 10, like a $9 or $9.5 million deal with the Lightning. And I wouldn't be surprised. And I'm perfectly fine with it. It doesn't really affect anything else the Lightning want to do. They do have that, a little bit extra space now that the Raddysh situation is closed. So they could still do that. They can still work in a Kucherov extension along with, helping out on that forward line. I'm fine with, as long as it's under 3 years. 3 years or less.
What if you had to go to the fourth year? Yes or no, real quick.
Again, it'd be tough. 4 years would be tough. I would have to question.
Oh, is that a no? 4 years a no?
I think 4 years is a no. I think 3 years is my max with Carlson. One thing with speedy guys and older guys, you start breaking down a lot easier. So I think you got 2 good years of Carlson left. A third year wouldn't be horrible. 4 years, I think, is a bit too much.
Brian Pano's our final question from the mailbag said, I'm not exactly sure why Bowen Byram, with 43 points last year, should be getting more than Darren Raddysh, who had his best season at 70. He said, right now, you look at these two guys, Byram has never been a number one. Now, Raddysh has been limited, but has been. But Justin, you had talked a little bit about Byram's age. He's 25 years old. I don't care how you're looking at this. There's a big difference when you're investing that many years, 8 years, into a 25-year-old defenseman versus a 31-year-old defenseman.
Yeah, I mean, my immediate answer to that question would be how many NHL points did Darren Raddysh have at 25? And the answer is not going to be 43. So I think the reason he's going to get more money is the fact he's younger. Flat out, that's it. End of story. He's 25. Darren Raddysh is 30. And I think a $10 million deal signed today probably ages pretty well for a Bowen Byram. Because his floor is he's going to be a good second pairing. Kind of like the gentleman from Buffalo said, he's a great complementary defenseman. He's a solid 3-4 defenseman. His ceiling, however, if he goes to Chicago and he shows that he can be a number 1 or number 2 defenseman, if you got that guy locked up at $10 million, in 4 years, what's Cal McCarr going to sign for? Like, Cal McCarr is probably going to make 14 million, 15 million. What's Matthew Schaefer going to make when his rookie deal's over? And he's probably going to be making 17 or 18 million dollars. And you're going to look back and be like, oh, we got Bowen Byram for 10 million. That's, $8 million less. It's just the nature of the game. It's the nature of the salary cap. It's the nature of the way the economics in the NHL works. It's going to be, people are going to make more money as time goes on. It's what the players union want. It's what the players want. So that's just the way it's going to go. And the honest answer is just the fact that he's 5 years younger than Darren Raddysh. So there you go.
Well, when you said Matthew Schaefer, I'm thinking, wow, he's about 60.
Yeah, hey, okay, so he makes $5 million a year if he comes back. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, the Matthew Mathieu,
exactly. Yeah,
former Montreal Canadien. But Justin, we're going to talk about some of the signs and trades, the trades that have been made, and how it's going to affect the Lightning. First of all, I want to talk about Alex Tuch going to Washington. Buffalo gets a 3rd-round pick. It's a sign and trade. Washington immediately signs Alex Tuch to an 8-year deal. His contract is $10.5 million. It's a big dollar amount for a guy who is a good player, but is not one of the top 15 players in the league. I want to ask you this. With Kucherov coming up to free agency in the very near future, if Alex Tuch is making 10.5, what's Kucherov making?
In an honest world, 14 million probably. I think if he goes to open market, you have absolutely no problem doing 14 million. It was kind of funny. One of the things we did today over at Raw Charge earlier this week is just for fun, I traded everybody on the roster. Just came up with an article, traded every single player. And I traded, I think it was Kucherov and Dominic James to the Rangers for, I believe it was 2 first-round picks and one of their defensive prospects who's still playing in college, and then Will Coyle. And something I forgot about is that if you do this stuff on Puckpedia, if you do the GM mode, people can comment on it, right? I kind of forgot about that, which never read the comments. And it's one of the comments was, New York says no. Now, I had published this before the Brady Tkachuk deal. Now, Brady Tkachuk gets traded for 3 first-round picks.
And Justin, I want to say it's 2 26 first-round picks, a 29 first, and a 2030 second. That was the trade. Okay, go ahead.
For Brady Tkachuk. If you could get Nikita Kucherov for 2 first-round picks, a college prospect, and, a third-line forward, you would do that trade in a heartbeat. I don't care what team you are, what kind of GM you are, you would do that in a heartbeat. So now I feel like I'm shit. Or sorry, excuse me, shoot. I undersold Kucherov a little bit there, But yeah, on the free agent market, I think he's easily $14 million, probably a 6-year deal. So it is going to be interesting to see what he signs for to stay in Tampa. I think he really likes playing in Tampa. I don't think he's a guy that seeks glory. I don't think he wants to play on the big stage. I think he's very happy that he can go to, he could walk to the rink if he wanted to, and 5 people would notice him, right? It's interesting. That's something Stamkos said when he re-signed with the Lightning a few years ago when that big deal came up. He likes being able to go walk his dog in the park and not be hassled, right? That's something that Tampa offers. Even though we've become a really big hockey town down here, you see a lot more Lightning flags, a lot more people know this game down here. a lot of these players can still walk around in anonymity out of uniform. So he can walk around and the pressure isn't quite there like it would be in New York or Toronto, Montreal. So I do think he ends up taking a discount to stay in Tampa. I wouldn't be surprised to see him sign for something like 5 years, $12 million would be my ballpark right now to stay in Tampa. And I think he's worth it. I think his game is going to age gracefully. I think he's still going to be a 100-point guy 5 years from now. Maybe not a 130-point guy, but he's still going to be putting up points. So I think he's going to be fine. But yeah, I think on the true free agent,
I think it's 14 or 15.
Bidding 14 or 15. Like, I don't think he catches Kaprizov, which is just such a weird deal, even looking back a year later. But yeah, I think you're looking at 15, 16. I think he does something like McDavid did up in Edmonton, where he takes a little bit less just to try and keep this core together a little bit longer and shoot for the cup.
Well, let's talk about Brady Tkachuk. Goes from Ottawa to Florida. Florida feels that they have another 3 or 4 years left in this run. General manager Bill Zito has basically said, you know what, we don't care about first-round draft picks. We're going to just get talent, and we are going to go for it. We thought Florida was pesky and tough before. This just adds to that. They are going to be a team that if they make the playoffs, they have a lot of those guys that just do the little things to, one, drive another team nuts, but they have a lot of guys that do little things that help you win. I think this puts Florida back in the top 3 in the division. What about you? Yes or no?
I mean, I think they were going to be top 3 of the division just with Barkov coming back. I think that was the biggest blow that they had last year, is not having, the perennial Selke guy as your number 1 center. I think Brady Tkachuk is fine. I think he's going to have a role to play in Florida. I don't think he's going to be, a top line winger. I think he's going to play on the second or third line. He's probably going to play with his brother a little bit just for the fun. My initial thoughts on this deal was, is Florida making the same mistake that teams before them have made? The Pittsburghs, the Chicagos, Tampa, where you're trading these assets that you have, these younger assets. So you had the number 9 pick overall and Mackie Skamasic, a young forward on the uprise. You trade them for established talent to keep this window open. Something we've talked about probably since college, probably 30 years now, is there's 2 things you want to be in the NHL. You want to be very, very good, or you want to be very, very bad. You get stuck in the middle, kind of where the Lightning are right now, where you're kind of not getting these high draft picks. I think you got to take advantage when you have some of these picks. And, Florida trading the 9th overall pick this year, for Brady Tkachuk, who's, aging, he plays a physical game. He's probably not destined for a much longer career. Are you making the same mistake other teams have made? And are you actually closing your window by going older as opposed to developing some of these younger assets that you have? It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Second thought is, we're basically in the player empowerment era for the NHL. We've seen this in the NBA, where the players can start dictating where they want to go. I think that's kind of trickled over into the NHL now. You've seen it with Quinn Hughes. You're seeing it with Dylan Larkin. You saw it with Brady Tkachuk. He basically told him, I'm not re-signing in 2 years in Ottawa. So you can trade me now, you can trade me later, but I am not re-signing. So figure it out. Here's where I want to go. Even Morgan Riley in Toronto, he's given him, I think it was 4 Western Conference teams. This is where I want to go. And hats off to the players. I think they deserve this. They earn this. I'm not a big fan of the way the Lightning, or the way the NHL does free agency, restricted free agency, the draft, any of that stuff. I believe, players should have the right to go where they want. So, you figure somebody drafted at 18, they can't decide where they want to go until they're roughly 26. That's your best years, right? Metrics have always shown that players are usually at their best between 22 and 25 years old or so. So you're giving your best years to a team that controls how much they pay you. So hats off to these players who have figured out a way to go where they want to go. And, I don't like the Tkachuks. I don't like Brady. I'm not a big fan of the way he plays. But I think he goes to the perfect team, and hats off to him for using the power that he has to go where he wants to go.
Well, I'll say this, the players signed the deal. And so that's the deal that they have. When you compare it to the other leagues, they have a very favorable situation when it comes to restricted free agency and free agency, the chance to really maximize beyond that rookie level deal. And that was one of the things that you see in baseball, where you have to go to arbitration to really get your deal changed at all. And then it's not even a negotiation. It's basically a settlement coming from an arbiter. But let's talk a little bit about some of the other deals. The Devils trade Simon Nemec to Calgary, former second overall pick. Now, Calgary had made a number of deals. They got rid of Rasmus Anderson. They got rid of Nazem Kadri. So they had a boatload of picks. They sort of threw caution to the wind to get Nemec, and Nemec is a player who didn't really live up to expectations in New Jersey. Now, if you ask Nemec, and he's been in the media, said, I never felt like I got a fair shake in New Jersey. He's going to in Calgary. He's going to be the guy. I'm not going to blame Calgary for doing this, because it was going to be hard for them to attract any top-level free agents, considering where they've been in the standings. I'm just not sure Nemec is that guy that you can say, you know what, he's worth all those picks.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the Byram deal on steroids a little bit. You're betting on a change of scenery, allowing this guy to develop into the player he was projected to be when he was drafted. And like you said, the nice thing is in Calgary, he's going to get that opportunity. They're probably not fighting for the Stanley Cup in the next 2 or 3 years. So he's going to have a chance to go ahead and make mistakes, play 25 minutes a game, and, develop as a player. Hopefully it pays off for him. If it does, then you look back and you'd be like, a couple first round picks, who cares? I think both sides played it pretty well. I think New Jersey got what they needed out of the deal. Calgary gets that guy that they can hopefully start building around. They're starting to put together some young players out there. So we'll see how it goes from there.
The final trade I want to talk about is Jordan Kyrou going from St. Louis to Washington. This is probably the closest thing we had to a true hockey trade. Connor McMichael goes from Washington to St. Louis. Milton Gastrin, who is their Swedish prospect, 19-year-old center, and St. Louis got a first-round pick. Now, this is a little bit odd because Kyrou's coming off a pretty bad season, 46 points last year. Connor McMichael, 46 points. Now, he had a better year last year, the previous year as well. Kyrou, when you look at him, typically a 27 to 37 goal scorer, typically gets mid-60s to mid-70s in points. If Washington gets that player, they're going to love the deal. St. Louis is going to love this deal, I think, no matter what. They get younger, they get quicker, and they get some guys with promise. I think if you're looking at a team like Tampa, and I'm looking at this deal, I don't know if you have somebody in your system who is 25 and younger who can go out there and get that and attract that kind of player in return. And I think that's a little bit, Justin, where I'm a little bit concerned about the Lightning. You have the Connor Geekies of the world, but I'm not sure out there that the Connor Geekies, maybe Sam O'Reilly, who hasn't played yet in professional hockey, I'm not sure they have that guy in the minors or who is a promising player to go out and try to get that Jordan Kyrou type of player.
Yeah, and I think that's probably part of the reason you haven't seen them make a move yet. Washington's really kind of the surprise team in what's happened over the last 48 hours. I don't think anybody had them labeled to get Jordan Kyrou, and I for damn sure know that nobody had them going after Alex Tuch. It makes me wonder. I think maybe Alex Ovechkin has made his decision. Maybe he's not coming back, so they're kind of reloading the best that they can, and they're putting together a pretty good team. They didn't miss the playoffs by that much. I think they've made some really nice moves, and I think the fact that McMichael went to St. Louis was probably with the assumption that they knew they were going after Tuch, and they kind of needed to play, open up some playing time. You got Alexi Protas, you got Ryan Leonard that are going to probably be in your top 6 as well with Tuch and Kyrou now. So it's starting to get a little crowded up there. So they did have to get rid of a top 6 forward. I think St. Louis has played this pretty well. They're up to 4 picks in the first round. I don't think they're done trading either. I wouldn't be surprised if Jordan Bennington's traded in the next 48 hours as well. We've talked about Florida a little bit, what they've done to get Kachuk. They don't have a goaltender.
They have no goaltending.
They have zero goaltending, and they've kind of shot their shot as far as what they have to trade. With Bennington kind of not having the greatest season last year, to pry him out of St. Louis's hand, especially with Joel Hofer taking over as the number 1, it's probably not going to cost him as much. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Bennington go to Florida.
Justin, let's talk about expansion. The NHL is taking the preliminary steps into expansion. Dan Friedkin, the multi-billionaire out in Houston, he is the one who is potentially looking at getting a franchise in that market. Now, it looks like, unlike most times where they say, hey, you have a presence in Houston, go for it. They're telling him Houston or Austin, Texas. Now, we all know that Houston is one of the biggest television markets out there, but Austin is one of the fastest growing cities. The NHL in the past has taken shots on cities that you're the only game in town. Now, they did that with Columbus, and the Blue Jackets have a nice following, but Austin, Texas has a big following. Of course, you have to compete with the University of Texas, which is down there. But you go to Houston, you're the 4th major sport in a 4-sport city. You go to Austin, you're the only game in town when it comes to professional sports. The other thing is, too, when you look at TV markets, Austin, Texas is approximately 35th. But when the Nielsen ratings split up markets, they don't include San Antonio, which is only 70 miles south. When you combine both of them, you have a top 15 market. I think Austin is the pick. You're Gary Bettman. Do you go to Houston or Austin?
I think another nice thing about this is you can have the 2 cities play off of each other, right? Wherever they go, they're going to have to build a new arena. So now you got 2 cities that can be like, well, I'm going to give you $750 million. Well, I'll give you $800 million in these tax breaks. They can go in and they can kind of negotiate between the 2 cities as far as who's going to give them a better deal. Austin is one of your fastest growing cities, and to be the top dog, kind of like Vegas was with the NHL, you're in first. And now you can show other leagues that professional sports can succeed in this city. Now, all of a sudden, you got a football team, you got a baseball team, and you're probably going to have an NBA team in Vegas pretty soon as well. And then you're looking at, he wants to keep it even. 33 is going to be an odd number, so expansion is going to happen after that.
They're going to try Atlanta again.
It's going to be Atlanta. And again, I think Atlanta can work, but it comes down to having the right owner.
One of the things I want to say, though, with Atlanta, and I've traveled to Atlanta quite a bit over my time. I even covered it with one of my jobs. But the one thing with Atlanta is getting in and out of that town is damn near impossible on a game day. It's one of the reasons why the Braves moved out to the northwestern suburbs of Atlanta. Getting downtown in Atlanta is not going to work. It's just not. Yeah. If they get an expansion team, it has to go out where the Braves are playing, or there's no reason to try Atlanta again. You're going to go after the same formula that didn't work. One of the reasons that people did not go was it was impossible to get home from work and get back into the city. Well, you can read Justin each and every day at www.rawcharge.com. For Justin Godfrey, I am Jason Linkus. Thanks for joining us today. We'll be back next week with a Lightning Draft recap and getting ready for July 1st, the beginning of free agency. Thanks again. Appreciate all the support. Hit that like and subscribe button and go Bolts.
Thank you for listening to Backchecking the Bolts. We are free and available on all platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon, YouTube, and Deezer. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to subscribe and leave a review. You can follow Justin on Blue Sky at rawcharge.com. You can follow the show on X at Tampa_Bolts_pod and on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Backchecking the Bolts. If you're interested in advertising on the show or partnering with us, You can find more information in the show notes or email Jason at backcheckingthebolts@yahoo.com.